Good evening, my friends. Well, we will obviously wait a few minutes. We're going to wait for all of our other friends to come and join us this evening. It feels kind of funny to be back kind of in the routine and back sitting at my desk instead of wandering around the house doing Bible study. But it is also good, I have to tell you, to have this routine kind of back in place. And I'm going to be moving things around a little bit. Obviously, I'm not quite sure where I want to sit. Apparently, I kind of am wiggling. And I got to stay close to my markers. We know that. And I need to stay close to, you all as well. Well, I'm praying that that your week has been good. It's been different, and we all know that we are all struggling with how different things are right now. They're not like they used to be. They're not even like they were a month ago, maybe. Definitely not 10 months ago. Things have definitely changed for us and for our culture and for our community. What we know is God is with us, no matter what. Now, for those of you that are on Facebook with me, you know that I have today just gone nuts taking pictures. God has definitely created some interesting images in the last couple of days with the ice and the rain and the sleet and the snow. And today the melting and the glistening on the trees and the grass. It was, I'm going to tell you, I really was speechless and in how it has just personified God's grace and glory even that much more. And so as I've been working inside a lot, obviously these last couple days, it is good. It is good to be home, though. I have to tell you, apparently I don't do so well sometimes traveling. I think I have discovered that after being in Texas for a couple of days, that being in the city is just really hard to be in the city with a lot of traffic and a lot of overhead bridges, and I don't like heights, so get me up on those bridges and I start getting nervous. And so I think, if I doubted I was a country girl, I think I have now understood I am, truly. Now I have to tell you, it just dawns on me, and I'm looking in my background through my window there. That's one of those, it's a ball, and it's changing. It's, the lights are coming on and off. So don't get freaked out that I have like a little monster coming in my back door. But it's the first time I've sat at the desk and done a study. We've done everything in other spaces, which has been fun. You need to make sure and have your Bible. And obviously, we're going to have to, I think, review just a little bit to kind of catch up to where we are. So we're going to be in Genesis chapter 24. Tonight, we'll do a little bit of review. We're going to move forward as well. We'll move through the front part of this fairly fast. And then we will get on into some of the meat of this. It's really a fascinating part of Genesis. But like I said, I'm so glad to be back doing this. I mean, doing the Advent was fun and it was good, but it's good to be back doing this part, where I think we all get pushed and pulled a little bit to grow and to understand some things in a new and different way. And what I'm discovering, and I think I may have said it before, is that because of this, it has enriched and deepened my preaching ability, because I'm looking at things in a different way, in a different lens, a different side of that, maybe icicle as a reference point for what tonight is like. And so it is good. The sad part is did you realize we only have about 5 weeks and it's Ash Wednesday? It's crazy how quick things move, and we move from one to the next until we get into that long green season, the long season for us. And In fact, that was one of the things I accomplished while we were on vacation. Of course, I was not working, except that I think I have Lent planned out. So it's okay, but I wasn't working. I was really having fun reading. Well, I was, but I was also having fun challenging myself. I think we may just go ahead and we'll stop for a moment and we'll pray, and then we'll get started here. God, I just ask for all of our friends who are gathering to be with us tonight, that they remain safe. We know that in this time and this space that things are so uncertain for us. Things are in limbo and in question. We don't know how to celebrate. We don't know how to do. And yet you are pushing us to understand more deeply your love for us. So be with us this night, that we can open our hearts to hear your words and see your study and see your things in maybe a new way. In your name we pray. Amen. Okay, like I said, Genesis 24. We're going to kind of come backwards because I think we need to remember where we were. I know I started picking this up to study it, and I kind of went, who are we talking about? Where are we at? What are we doing? And I was a little like, okay, now we'll figure this out. So we're going to come back to 24 and just kind of refresh our memory, because it's the betrothal journey. It is about, and we have to remember, this is part of the Abraham cycle with Yitzhak, Isaac, and Rivka. And we're going to go through this, and we need to remember that part of the story. So we need to remember that in the beginning of 24, we know that Abram was old. He was about 140 years old at this point in time. And Yahweh had blessed him in everything. He had given him servants, and he had given him wealth. He had given him family. He had given him everything. But there was a but in that, isn't there? There always is. A but that says there was a little more that God needed. And as we were going through this chapter, there were about 5 words that we were paying attention to. It was go, because Abraham is sending his servant to go, to journey, grant success, take, and marry. Now those are kind of the key words for chapter 24 for us to kind of keep in mind as we were moving through this. We also need to remember that Abraham, his servant, was we think his name was Eliezer, about 88-year-old gentleman. And very dear friend, obviously, had been with Abraham for many, many years. And you remember how they made that pledge, and that promise was that Eliezer put his hand under Abraham's thigh as it was customary sign of that this was a serious undertaking that Eliezer was taking. And so it was that indicator that in that very private space, if you think about it, I don't care whether male or female, for any of us to put our hand underneath the thigh of another would be very personal. It'd be very close. So this is all about family. And Abraham is sending Eliezer on a journey, which is part of this. He has to go on a journey. He is wanting to grant him success because he knows there will be success granted at this. He's taking, camels full of items, full of things to do, full of gold and silver and jewels and all that kind of thing. He's taking much, and it's all about marriage that is to happen. Now, as we were going through this, we heard the promises that, and about Eleazar being a steward and what this was to look like and how this was to happen. And it was to be a virgin. And I think it's interesting. If we think about that, that Abraham is looking for Isaac to have a virgin, thinking about Mary. And there's some correlation that we can start to see maybe in some of what's happening. I don't want to correlate them all. I don't think it correlates all the way down. But it is important for us to remember that. And so as we get to verse 22, okay, he has met Rebecca at the well. And that was part of the foretelling that would happen, is that this would happen. And remember whose well it is? It's Jacob's well. It is the well that becomes significant throughout history and throughout our historical telling of the stories. But Jacob's well is extremely important for us. We already heard about Jacob's well earlier in Genesis, so it's not new. But if we look at verse 21, the man kept staring at her, waiting. That's kind of a key word, that waiting, silently to find out whether Yahweh had granted success to his journey or not. There's all those words that we were looking for. There's those words that are starting to come into play as we think about this story. He was waiting silently. He was patiently in prayer. He wanted to know, is this the one that God truly sent me to find? Or is there another? Patience is what Eleazar has to have at this time. Verse 22. Well, and I think she did everything that he had prayed about. And yet it seemed too easy. This was a young woman who comes to the well with the pitcher on her shoulder. It was everything as had been prayed for and prayed about. And yet Eleazar is kind of like going, is this really how it's supposed to be? This is like too easy. And he maybe began to doubt a little bit. But God gives him another sign. And he knows that it is the woman that he has come to search for, and for Yitzhak then to marry. And yet, it's often the same thing for us, that we are blind to see God right in front of us, or that gift right in front of us that we've been searching for, we've been longing for. Is it what we're supposed to do, God? Am I in the right place? Am I doing the right thing? What is it you're calling me to do? And yet he's giving the answer, but we often want to make it more difficult, or we want to question and doubt. That's kind of what Eleazar is doing here. He's having those moments. So let's look at verse 22. It was when the camels had finished drinking that the man took a gold, I think this is interesting, nose ring, a half coin in weight, and 2 bracelets for her wrists, 10 gold pieces in weight, and said, okay, he already is taking things out that he is to give to the promised one, or to the one that has already been foretold is going to be the bride of Yitzhak. Okay, and so in verse 23, and said, but this is after giving the gifts, that he asks the question. He gives her these gifts. And I have to say, when I think about the nose ring and the bracelets and everything, and so we wonder how come in our culture sometimes we kind of go, and what are they thinking? What are those young'uns thinking about? And yet is it so far-fetched? that even in biblical times and Old Testament times, what the women were graced with. Okay, verse 23. So Anne said, "Whose daughter are you? Pray tell me." He wants to know, and is there perhaps in your father's house a place for us to spend the night? Now, Eleazar wants to make sure of the wealth and status of this family. Do they have the ability to make a deal? Because that's going to be important, and that's about staying someplace. This is not about lustfully Eleazar wanting to be with Rivka. This is about, is there a place? And is there, and I got to get some more information. This is a little bit about knowing family heritage. He needs to remember the promise that was made to Abraham. So we need to remember this is, unlike maybe we do, maybe we don't, as soon as we meet someone, kind of do a family heritage. That was customary. It was customary for these people to do that. So she said to him, "I am the daughter of Bethuel, son of Milcah, whom she bore to Nahor." Now we know that this is Yitzhak's cousin. The formal introductions are provided by a brief genealogy, although I have to kind of chuckle because, a couple weeks ago I was in Kansas City and started talking to, she's become a very good friend already. And we discovered, one, that our brothers went to school together. But we discovered we had been in church together and didn't even know it. Because her family came from this parish, went to Kansas City, went to the parish in Kansas City that my grandmother, my grandfather, my mom, all were part of, and where I was baptized. In fact, her parents were married by the same pastor that baptized me in Kansas City. And we started to make a family connection, and the ties are there. She knows my cousins. She knows my family. So really, we did start down the trail of family genealogy in maybe essence to establish credibility for each other. It's interesting that we do that. Now, I do realize here in the Axtell, Frankfurt kind of area that everyone is related. And I do know that. I figured that out. So your family history for me gets very confusing sometimes of how everyone fits together. And that's where this person fits into the family heritage here as well. And I had to put all the pieces together. And I finally got part of them in my head, maybe. Okay. So lineage is important. Verse 25. And she said to him, "Yes, there is straw. Yes, plenty of fodder with us. And yes, a place to spend the night." This is the point that Eleazar knows that there has been success in his journey. So those were first words, the grant success. This is the point Eleazar knows there has been success in his journey. Now it's time, maybe, to think about talking to her parents. I mean, right now we've only got Rivka talking. We only have the daughter talking. We have not met the rest of the family yet. And so we got to get the rest of the story, don't we? We have to know what's going to happen here. Verse 26. And in homage the man bowed low before Yahweh. Eleazar has sensed the divine goodness of what is happening in front of him. The story is being unfolded right in his midst, and it is an awesome piece of the story to understand. Just as I got more excited hearing more of the story in Kansas City at the church that I really went to a lot of services in. We just didn't realize we knew each other. And we know the same people. the same story has been played out. Verse 27, and said, Eleazar's talking, blessed be Yahweh, God of my Lord Abraham, who has not relinquished his faithfulness and his trustworthiness from my Lord. While as for me, Yahweh has led me on the journey, to the house of my Lord's brother. This is probably the point that Eleazar comes to faith. This is the point where Eleazar realizes God's might and power and his ability to work things out according to his plan. I had to make myself a note. He spoke of God as Abraham's God. He spoke of him as his God. But now he bows and worships God himself. He knew it was no accident at this point that he had been led to Rivka, to the well, and now pronounces his faith in not just of Abraham's God, but of his God. He is now a man of faith. Eleazar has now seen all that God can do. All the glory and the beauty is coming through now. And for now is the timing. Verse 28, the maiden ran. I love it. The maiden ran and told her mother's household according to these words. Now, it's not uncommon in that culture. Men and women would have had separate tents or separate rooms or separate apartments. And it really is not, if we think about it, it would not be uncommon for a young woman to run to her mother and say, Mom, guess what just happened to me at the well? And she may not have been quite so excited, but she may have been. She is now going to her mother first. We're not sure about where is the men of the house right now. And we're going to find out here in a minute. But she runs to her mother's room first to start to tell her what has just happened. Actually, if we look ahead at verse 67, it's kind of interesting that there's a little more detail. 24:67, if you skip ahead to that verse, it really is interesting because in 67, it says that Yitzhak brought her into the tent of Sarah, his mother. Well, wait a minute. Okay, this is once they return. But again, Yitzhak even goes to his mother, just like Rivka's gone to her mother. So there's something cultural in that we tend to go to our mothers first, and then the rest of the story unfolds. Verse 29. Now Rivka had a brother, and his name was Laban, or Laban, depending on how your translation is in your Bible. Now, Laban ran to the man outside to the spring. Now, Laban, at this point, he is the elder brother. This is after she was home. And we don't even know what Laban knows at this point. All he knows is that there's a man with Rivka, with his sister, and he runs, which is uncommon for men in that culture to run. Men just didn't run. It wasn't something that was really acceptable or culturally relevant for them. The other thing that I thought was interesting is Laban's name means white. He was presumably out of a fair-skinned tribe, and so his name means white. Interesting, right? And culturally, what does that mean? I don't know. I just know it's interesting that it's a fair-skinned tribe that he would have come from at that point. Okay. So verse 30. And it was, as soon as he saw the nose ring and the bracelets on his sister's wrist, and as soon as he heard Rivkah, his sister, words saying, thus the man spoke to me, that he came out to the man. There, he was still standing by the camels by the spring. Obviously, Rivkah had put the nose ring in. She had the bracelets on. Laban, I probably culturally knows what this means. This is all preceding, and there's going to be an asking of a marriage proposal to happen. This is not irrelevant, and it's not uncommon for what would have been happening at the time culturally. And so Laban knows something's up, and now we know that Eleazar knows that his mission has been a success. There is something about this, that there is something about Laban's personality, let's say, that's going to start to show through, that he is a very coveting kind of man. He has a disposition that is not necessarily on the up and up all the time. And so it's going to be interesting, and we're going to watch what happens with Laban as we move through the reading. And said, now what we have to remember is that there have been now temporal and spiritual blessings by worshiping God and in thankfulness for everything that's going on here. And I think it's important for us to remember that. And I think the journey of Eleazar, to me, has become more fascinating. I hadn't even thought about part of this until I was studying it again, and I went, wait a minute, Eleazar made a journey of faith. He made a commitment now to Abraham, but now to his God. The God of creation is now his God, not the God of Baal. He has changed and understands this goodness. Verse 31, and said, come, you who are blessed by Yahweh, and why are you standing outside? And we're really not sure. Is this a rebuke for not following Rivkah on into the house? Or is this just Laban being kind of the, come on, hurry up, you got to get in here. We got to get things done. Don't you know, we got to get some food. We got to get the camels taken care of, and we need to wash your feet. It may be that that's as part of what's going on here. We're not sure. I mean, there's a little bit of question on how that's being said. See, he says then, I myself have cleared out the house and a place for the camels. All has been made ready. Now, I want to know, I doubt if it was Laban who really did it. But I also want to know, how did he know that Eleazar was coming? I wonder if God not only was preparing Eleazar and Rivkah, but was he preparing Laban and the household? We don't know. It's interesting. It's interesting to ponder. I've thought about that one. Verse 32. The man came into the house and unbridled the camels. They gave straw and fodder to the camels and water for washing his feet and the feet of the men that were with him. Well, they unbridled the camels because camels can't eat when they have the bridle in. And they needed to unload them. Also so the camels could lay down and they could rest as well. It was normal for the day to offer water. And this is really now about the good news of family is going to be shared. Laban has now figured out that Abraham, this is Abraham's servant. Eleazar has come, and there's some genealogy and family catching up. Hey, how's it been? What's been going on back there? How is that old Abraham? How's that old Sarah? They're getting kind of old, aren't they? Yeah. I think there had to be some catching up on family connections, don't you think? I'm pretty sure that's part of what was going on there. Okay. I find verse 33 kind of interesting. Because Eleazar kind of puts a stop to some things and says, wait, food was put before him to eat. But he said, I will not eat until I have spoken my words. And he said, speak. Okay, Eleazar's about business. He wants to get the business taken care of first. He needed to identify his master and explain his mission. Maybe not stressing the blessings of God upon his master and his trip at this point anyway. And he was wanting to conclude the task and be able to return home. He wanted to make sure the deal was done. And then they could start into food and libations, which would have been abounding, I'm sure, for Eleazar and the rest of the servants that were there. You have to remember, Eleazar did not go alone. He had probably 10 or 12 more servants, that his underlings, that was with him. So he was not alone. What we find in these next few verses, in fact, quite a few verses, 34 through 48, is really how committed and selfless and faithful that Eleazar is. We're going to hear him in these next verses really wanting to know or wanting to be faithful throughout this. So he says, I am Abraham's servant. Well, I'm hoping by now that he'd already done that, but he's also trying to put Laban and the family at ease. He wanted to identify now who he was. If he had, it seems odd that we're now in the house and at the well, that hadn't been done. But it may not have been. This may have been more culturally relevant for them to wait until they got into the house. Verse 35, Yahweh has blessed my Lord exceedingly, so that he has become great. He has given him sheep and oxen, silver and gold, servants and maids, camels and asses. Eleazar wants to make sure that everyone knows of Abraham's success. This is really the temporal side. After giving glory to God, of course. But he wants to make sure that Laban understands this is not a deal that's kind of wussy. He wants to make sure he realizes he's serious about this deal. Verse 36, Sarah, my Lord's wife, bore my Lord a son after she had grown old. See, we're showing what Eleazar wants to do is still continue to show God's divine power and favor that has been placed upon Abraham and Sarah. There is now the rest of the story, maybe in Eleazar telling it, that he is being affirmed about his belief and now his new faith. And he has given him all that is his. So by God's will, Abraham has all that he has because God willed it. Not because he stole it or took it. But he's also defining the character of Abraham and Sarah. 37. Now, my Lord, had me swear, saying, you are not to take a wife for my son from the women of the Canaanites, in whose land I am settled. So he is sharing about the promise now that was made back in verse 3 of chapter 24. I'm going to give you references how now we're hearing the story through the words of Eleazar is being retold for you and me. Verse 38. No, to take to my father's house you are to go to my clan and take a wife for my son. See, Yitzhak was not to marry a heathen. He was to marry a virgin, a woman pure, a woman who was full of God's grace and mercy. Verse 39. I said to my Lord, perhaps the woman will not go after me. In verse 5 of 24 is a reference back over. Verse 40. Here's some more of those words we were looking for. He said to me, Yahweh, in whose presence I have walked, will send his messenger with you. He will grant success to your journey, so that you take a wife for my son from my clan and from my father's house. Which is, if we go back to verse 7, we'll find that repeated as well. Now in verse 41, all of this really does flip back. Earlier in 24, we're hearing the story. So if you want to go back and recall the story again, you can do that. Only then will you be clear from my binding oath when you come to my clan. If they do not give her to you, you will be clear from my binding oath. In verse 8, 24:8. Okay, so he has to go to Abraham's clan. He has to go to the family. But only if he doesn't find one of the women there who is to be Yitzhak's wife, he can be released from the oath, that binding oath for the hand under the thigh. Verse 43. Now I came to the well today and said, Yahweh, God of my Lord Abraham, pray if you wish, here's those words again, to grant success to the journey on which I am going. Now this wouldn't have been the same day. This is a several days journey that he's been on, that Eleazar's been on. And he wanted a sign, he needed a sign that he was being successful. In verse 43, here, I have stationed myself by the water spring. May it be that the girl who comes out to draw, to whom I say, pray, give me a little water from your pitcher to drink. Okay, that's in verse 14. But that is part of the signs of who will be. 44. And she says to me, you drink, and I will also draw for your camels. Let her be the woman whom Yahweh has decided on for the son of my Lord. That's also in verse 14. Referenced forward of the promise that's being given. In verse 45, and I, even before I finished speaking in my heart, here Rivkah came out, her pitcher on her shoulder. She went down to the spring and drew. And I said to her, pray, give me a drink. So in verses 15, 16, and 17, we hear the promise that Abraham is giving to Eleazar. In verse 46, oh my gosh, my friends, we're going to have to stop here soon. In haste, she let down her pitcher from herself and said, drink, and I will also give your camels to drink. And I drank, and she also gave the camels to drink. We find that part of the promise in verse 18. In verse 47, then I asked her, and I said, whose daughter are you? She said, the daughter of Bethuel, son of Nahor, whom Milcah bore to him. And I put the ring on her nose and the bracelets on her wrist. So in verses like 23, 24, 22, we find the references for that part of the promise. And in verse 48, and in homage I bowed low before Yahweh and blessed Yahweh, God of my Lord Abraham, who led me on the true journey to take the daughter of my Lord's brother for his son, which is in verse 26. I am fascinated because when he says, who led me on the true journey, I want to know something, and I would love to be able to ask the question, is this Eleazar's journey? And is it Abraham's journey? Is it both? Is this God's way of waking someone to faith because they hear the story and see it lived out? I think that's our stopping place, which I am sad about because I think we're just getting going. Okay? This time goes so fast, my friends. It really does. And I know that we have faced a tough year. A tough one. There has been COVID. There has been hunger. There has been thirsting. There has been gnashing of teeth because we are frustrated and angry. We have hurt. We have been alone. But I know this God of creation is holding each of us and has plans for each of us in his way. My friends, I know this night that we go, and we go in God's peace. I ask that he walk with you, to lead you, to walk ahead of you, to keep you safe, to walk behind you, to hold you when you fall, to walk above you, to give you his light, and to walk below you, to guard your feet and keep your path straight. My dear friends, I get to say, I cannot wait to see you all next year, both on Sunday morning at 10 o'clock, and next Wednesday we gather back here at 7 o'clock to continue our journey with Abraham and with Rivka and Laban and Eleazar and all of those people who came before us to lead us in faith. God's peace this night, my friends. See you soon.